Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I'm so glad you could join me today. Today's video is another sobriety, reflections, or sit-down chatty video. This is something that I've been wanting to talk about on my channel, something that I feel like we don't talk about enough, and something that was really important for me to realize before I was ever successful with cutting alcohol out of my life. It's actually a very simple premise. You don't have to be an alcoholic to quit drinking completely. I've kind of dabbled on this topic in lots of my other sobriety videos. If you are here because you're on your sobriety journey or sober curious, definitely check out my other content on sobriety. I've got a ton of videos on my own journey with alcohol. So sit down, get comfortable, grab a drink. I've just made myself a drink and I haven't mixed it yet because I wanted to show it off. I always considered myself a beverage girly when I was drinking, but since I quit drinking, I've become so much more of a beverage person, and I just love exploring new drinks where I used to just kind of get the same shit every day. And we went to a coffee shop a couple weeks ago and they had it on the menu. It's called a citrus buzz. I don't know if that's literally what it's called. I've never actually seen a drink like this before. And it is lemonade, a little bit of sparkling water, and espresso. And to me, it's kind of in the same vein as an espresso tonic, which is espresso with tonic water and lime, which if you've never had it, I know it sounds weird. I had that in Philadelphia for the first time and it was like mind-blowing. The perfect summery coffee drink that isn't like milky. Anyway, so this is kind of, it reminds me of that. Mix it up here. I DIY'd this one. I've been trying to perfect it at home. It's such a fun flavor combination because you have like obviously the sour sweetness from the lemonade and then the bitterness from the espresso, and then it's like sparkling too slightly with the soda water. I recommend trying it because it's unexpectedly delicious. But now that I have my drink situated and I'm comfortable, let's talk about something that I think is really important. In my early 20s, when I started drinking more just because it's what people were doing, it's what we were doing for fun, it was like the height of the craft beer industry, and a lot of sort of social activity was going out and drinking at breweries and wineries and whatever. I didn't know anyone who was my age, who was like a young social person who didn't drink alcohol. And I feel like we're finally moving away from this narrative, but even just a few years ago, I truly believed that if you weren't an alcoholic, if you didn't have a terrible drinking problem, if you like could get through the day without having a drink early in the morning or whatever, like there was no reason for you to quit drinking, you know? Like you had to hit a rock bottom, you had to have a serious problem, a serious addiction to cut alcohol out of your life. It just never really occurred to me that I could choose to not drink for any reason at all. And looking back now, I can see how that really perpetuated the last few years of my drinking, because I kept going in a circle where I thought, okay, well, I don't have a drinking problem that we sort of culturally and in movies have created that people have in their head of what someone with a drinking problem looks like. And so I just kept trying to make alcohol work for me. I was like, well, I don't have a drinking problem, so like maybe I just have to try a little bit harder at moderating, or, you know, like, and I feel like I drank for longer because I truly didn't see not drinking at my age as like a normal available option to me. For myself, and I think for a lot of people, we never really made a conscious, informed decision to start drinking. It is so normalized in our society, it's so normalized in our culture that starting to drink is such a natural part of growing up for most people that there never really is a moment where you decide to drink. You just one day wake up and you realize that you've been drinking for 5, 10, 50 years. Which is interesting because I know that, you know, like in health class and school, we talked about drugs, we talked about cigarettes, we talked about safe sex. And I know that alcohol was mentioned in there, but I just don't feel like it had the same kind of weight to it, you know? Like, never really had the moment of like, okay, here are the pros and cons of starting to drink. It just kind of slowly became a part of my life, a very normal part of my life, like it was for everybody else. And only later in life, especially when I started doing my own research, did I learn more about what alcohol actually is. And scientifically, it is a drug. So maybe let's take a few steps back and talk a little bit about what my drinking looked like when I was a drinker. The first time I reflected on how much I was drinking was at the doctor's office. And it was an annual checkup. I must have been in my early 20s. And I went to the doctor and they gave me like a regular whatever sheet to fill out. And it was, one of the questions was, you know, how many units of alcohol do you drink per day? One, what's a unit of alcohol? I have no idea. And two, I've never actually stopped to think about how much I drink during the week, like in numbers. And so I had to sit there and I was like literally counting in my head, you know, on average, how many drinks do I have a night? Do I, you know, and I don't actually remember what I put down. So I try to average it out and it was probably like, okay, so on average, I don't drink every night, but if I had to average that out across the week, I probably have 2 drinks a night, you know, for the nights that I don't drink. And then on the weekends, I'll usually drink more. So I averaged it out to like 2 drinks a day, put down 14 drinks a week and handed it over. And it's funny to think back on now because I really was so naive at the time that I thought that was like really good, you know? I mean, the people that I was hanging out with, the people that I knew in my life, I feel like everyone was drinking like that. And I really thought that was a modest number of drinks per week. And so I get in with the doctor and we talk through all the other stuff, blah, blah, blah. And we get to the alcohol consumption portion and she was like, oh, hey, you know, what's going on? It looks like you're drinking quite a bit. And I was so taken aback by that. Because I was like, oh, no, it's like, you know, like 2 a day. And I kind of was walking her through it and she's like, oh, and she was like, let me tell you about sort of what the drinking standard is. And I mean, that was close to 10 years ago and things have changed a lot. I think it was actually this January where the Surgeon General actually released a report, you know, really underlining that no amount of alcohol is considered safe, even in moderation. So that probably affects these recommendations. But at the time when I was at the doctor that day, this sort of basic framework still existed. And for a moderate drinker, so someone who consumes alcohol in a responsible, moderate way, for adults of legal drinking age, that looked like 2 standard drinks for men a day and 1 standard drink for women a day. And I didn't know at the time what a standard drink was. So a standard drink is 12 ounces, like a can of regular beer. It's 5% or less. 5 ounces of wine, so a standard pour of wine, or 1.5 ounces, which I believe is just a standard shot glass of liquor in a cocktail or on its own. So already, even with my 2 drinks per day estimate, I was at the time a big craft beer drinker. I was drinking heavy duty IPAs. I was drinking big cans. I was drinking big pints at the breweries. So my pint of, say, a 8% IPA is already easily 2 drinks. And I was drinking 2 of those a day. That's 4 standard drinks. And it just really like blew my mind in the moment to be like, whoa, I'm drinking way more than I thought I was. A moderate drinker is drinking basically nothing. No one in my life that was a drinker that I knew at the time drank 1 standard drink a day. I mean, that was just, it blew my mind. And here's another layer to it, because this is where my mind went to. You can't save up those drinks. So it's not 7 drinks per week for a woman where you can like not drink during the week and then you can have 7 drinks on the weekend. That's not how that works. That's an average per day. And then she also explained what binge drinking was, which was then and is still today a very big issue, especially for young people in the way that they drink. And that looks like consuming 4 or more standard drinks in 1 session, so like 2 hours, which at the time, even looking at sort of how I went out on the weekends, I could easily, on a heavy drinking night, drink 6 standard drinks a night. So just by default, with the amount of alcohol I was consuming, even averaged across the week, I was already considered a heavy drinker. And that was my first moment as an adult, as someone who'd been drinking for years already. I had that moment of self-awareness around alcohol. Alcohol had just been a very like, haha, funny part of my life up until that moment. And that was the first time where I like stopped to actually think about drinking for the first time. Now, I didn't quit drinking until, years after that moment, but that was the first seed that was planted there, where I realized that the way that I was drinking and the way that people were drinking around me was not a moderate, healthy way to consume alcohol. And I continued to be a heavy drinker by those standards for several more years until I became sober curious and eventually quit drinking completely. But still, I was never someone who like fit the classic image to me of like an alcoholic. I didn't have to have a drink when I woke up. I could get through the workday fine without drinking. I could go all week without drinking until the weekend. Alcohol was a normal part of my life. It was a huge part of my social life, but I wasn't shaking or experiencing withdrawals when I wasn't drinking. And though I knew I was drinking too much, I just didn't consider that I had a drinking problem, and so I didn't really have a reason to quit, sort of in that narrative. Now, the term alcoholic came around at least 100 years ago, and the Alcoholics Anonymous program has been around for a really long time. It's helped a lot of people. I've put resources in sort of my videos previously. I absolutely think that the program works for some people, but we've come a very long way, even today, on how we understand drinking. And while people still use the term alcoholic, especially in the AA program, clinically, a drinking problem in the DSM-5, which is the manual that's updated, I don't know, every year, I think, and is used by mental health professionals to diagnose certain mental conditions, has a section on alcohol, on something that is now called alcohol use disorder, which is, like most other things in life, a spectrum. It is not black and white. You are not a non-alcoholic or an alcoholic. And I have it pulled up, so I'm just referencing it here. It's 11 criteria. So it's like a questionnaire that you go through. And so you can be diagnosed on a severity scale of alcohol use disorder. And the diagnosis standard is if you meet at least 2 of these in a 12-month period, you might be able to be diagnosed with AUD, alcohol use disorder. Either mild, moderate, or severe. So let's walk through these, and if you are a drinker especially, stick around because you might be really surprised what constitutes sort of red flags, if you will, for our relationship with alcohol. So let's go through this, and I'll answer it in the way that I answered it when I was drinking, when I first read this. So there's 11, I'll go through them quickly. These are sort of summaries of them, so I'm not sure if that's the exact wording used in the manual. Number 1, drinking more or for longer than intended. That is the first one, and I think so many of us, especially younger people who sort of drink in a binge drinking culture, or with people who are binge drinkers, this is such a huge one. It literally looks like, okay, I'm going out tonight, I'm gonna have 2 drinks, that's it, and then I'm done, I'm gonna go home. And you go out, you have your 2 drinks, and you think, nah, I'll have another, and you end up having 4 or 5, whatever. Or maybe you're going to brunch and you think, no, I'm not going to drink anything at brunch. I'm just going to have a coffee or whatever. And someone orders a pictures of mimosas and you go, all right, fine, I'll drink. Oh, okay, you're going to go to happy hour with the colleagues after work. You're going to have 1 drink and then head home. You end up, going to the next bar and the next bar, and it ends up being sort of a long night of drinking. These are such common experiences that it's literally a joke on TikTok about like how you get together with that one friend and you're only going to have 1 drink and you end up like going out on a wild night. All of those things are diagnosable criteria in the manual. So check for me. Definitely that was a big one where I often had a goal for how much I was going to drink or for how long I was going to drink. And I often, once I started, kind of was like, well, whatever, and continued to drink more or for longer than I intended or planned. Number 2, unsuccessful efforts to cut down or control drinking. I feel like this sort of folds into the first one too. This was a huge one for me. I had great plans. I was going to moderate. I had a bunch of rules for how I was going to drink. I would only drink beer, or I would only drink liquor, and I'd alternate with water or whatever. And I had all these sort of systems that I was going to try to drink less, to moderate, to control my drinking, and they often didn't work because it's great to have those plans when you're sober. Once you start drinking, you are expecting your drunk self to stay accountable and stick to your sober plan, which, as many of you will probably know, is a very hard thing to accomplish. So something like that, or maybe you had a plan to do dry January and you made it to week 2, then you went out and you sort of folded and drank even though you really planned not to drink for the whole month. So for me, that's also a check for that one. Number 3, spending a lot of time drinking or recovering from drinking. That was another really big one, especially back then. Most of my social activities revolved around drinking. Again, we were at the breweries, we were at the wineries, we were going out to bars, I was drinking at dinners. Like, drinking was just part of every social activity, basically. So just by default, I did spend a lot of time drinking. Recovering from drinking, this is another one that some people have worse than others. I had horrible hangovers, especially later on. I would just have debilitating hangovers, not like cute, let's go get some greasy brunch and I'll feel okay. Like, it was debilitating. I'd be wrecked for 12 plus hours in bed, like rag on my face. I think I have a picture somewhere I'll put up here. Vomiting, migraines, just, I was not doing okay. That alone was enough reason to quit drinking. But I personally spent a lot of time recovering from drinking. And then on the weekends, I would drink like that on Friday nights. I'd wake up, feel like absolute crap on Saturday, recover and then go back out Saturday night. So especially my weekends were literally spent drinking or recovering from drinking. So that one gets a check for me. I'm already 3 for 3. Number 4 is cravings or strong urges to drink. This was kind of like a yellow flag for me. I definitely had a hard time once I was out saying no to drinks. If someone was like, let's do shots, I was never the person to be like, no, not me, you know? There was sort of that drive to drink, but I never like woke up with cravings that I had to have a drink. I never like had alcohol on me that I needed to drink to sort of like get through things. So I'll pass on this one. Obviously for a lot of people, those cravings can be a huge part of their relationship with alcohol. Number 5, drinking interfering with work, school, or home responsibilities. So like your drinking affecting your other life responsibilities. I never had any severe consequences from my drinking. I got to work, sometimes hungover, which, you know, obviously wasn't great. So that's another one that's obviously a big red flag. I'll pass on this one for me because I don't feel like that really applied to me too much. Number 6, continuing to drink despite it causing problems in relationships. I will give myself this one. Drinking and relationships, both romantic and friendships, is such a mess. I feel like a lot of people relate to this, whether or not you're on your sobriety journey. When people are drunk, they are stupid. Drinking caused a lot of fighting in my romantic relationships, just the kinds of fights that I never, ever have when I'm sober. It put a huge strain on friendships. That caused a lot of strain in relationships. So I will definitely give myself that one. Drinking did affect my relationships, and I continued to drink despite that. This is one of the worst ones, I think, in my opinion, especially growing up in a household with parents who had drinking problems. I don't have any children, so that was something that I just didn't have any experience with, thank God. I know how devastating alcohol can be to a family relationship as well and a family dynamic. Number 7, giving up important activities because of drinking. I don't feel like this one really applied to me. I think in big part because I didn't really have a lot of hobbies. For some people that could look like, you know, not going to a family function because you'd rather go out with your friends instead to drink. You know, missing out on hobbies or activities that you used to enjoy, sort of choosing to drink instead. This one did not really apply to me. Number 8, using alcohol in physically dangerous situations. So that can look like drunk driving. I have never in all my days going out and drinking ever come across a designated driver. Not once. I'm sure people Uber in the city and stuff like that when they're out drinking, but like especially back in the brewery days, you'd go out to a brewery that was in the middle of nowhere somewhere in the farmland, and everyone drove there and everyone was hammered and everyone was driving home drunk with their kids and like their whole family's packed in the car. Oh my God, that is one that just blows my mind. For me, it also looked like hanging around with people who I would never spend time with. Not when I wasn't drinking, that would have been dangerous. I was also very much like a yes person. So if people were like, let's go to this house party with these people that you don't know, then I'd be like, okay, let's go. Stupid, dangerous. So I will give myself this one, especially sort of in my younger drinking days. I made a lot of decisions that I just never would have done if I wasn't drunk. Number 9, continuing to drink despite physical or psychological problems caused by alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. Alcohol has very significant effect on your body and your mental health. It is not good for you, and we know now that it's not good for you in any amount. It is a neurotoxin. It's really bad for your brain. It can exacerbate issues around depression or anxiety or ADHD. It increases your risk of hurting yourself if you are someone who's struggling with that. Physically, obviously, it's terrible for your liver. It's terrible for your brain. It can cause a lot of health issues. It's directly linked to many types of cancer. For me, I didn't really have a lot of physical issues. I mean, I was still very young and healthy otherwise. I did gain a lot of weight when I started drinking, so that's something that I could definitely attribute to that. Psychologically, I was very anxious, I was very depressed, and drinking made that a lot worse, and I continued to drink. I don't think I really realized until later how much alcohol sort of perpetuated that cycle, and that was not a good thing. So I will give myself this one as well. 10, needing more alcohol to achieve the same effect, so building tolerance to alcohol. Alcohol, like any drug, you can build tolerance for. I used to be very proud of what a heavyweight I was. I could drink many people under the table. I was never a blackout drinker. I really could drink a lot, and that came down to the fact that I drank a lot and I drank often, and so I over time needed more and more alcohol to achieve the same level of intoxication. So for me to get like a buzz, for some people they could have 1 beer, I had to have 2, and so it just continued to grow that way and I could drink a lot. And this is one that I think, especially if you are a regular drinker, this is something that I think a lot of people can relate to as well. That's just pretty standard. So building tolerance, I definitely had built up a tolerance to alcohol and needed more and more to get drunk. So check on number 10 too. And number 11, experiencing withdrawal symptoms when alcohol is stopped or reduced. This is another really common one with addictions. Again, just like any drug, alcohol does have withdrawal symptoms if you're consuming enough. Alcohol withdrawals are some of the worst drug withdrawals you can have. It can kill people. And if this is something that you experience, if you try to cut back your drinking, or when you stop, you experience physical withdrawals, shakes, sweats, sort of flu-like symptoms, please reach out to a medical professional. I had never experienced this, so I have absolutely no advice to give here. I never had any withdrawal symptoms at all, but it can be life-threatening. So this one especially, I just want to make sure that if this is something that you experience, please talk to a medical professional about it. Okay, so in terms of severity, mild alcohol use disorder falls into sort of 2 to 3 of those criteria met. Moderate is 4 to 5, and severe is 6+. So by this standard, I fell into severe alcohol use disorder based on these symptoms. And to be clear, all of those fell into sort of a very standard heavy drinker of the time lifestyle, where my life was never like out of control. I didn't have withdrawal symptoms. I wasn't drinking during the day to get through the day. This was just me being a heavy social drinker. I never identified as an alcoholic, and I still had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And this video is gonna be a long one just because I really wanted to walk through all of these specifically, not to scare anyone, but just to really give people the aha moment that I had when I learned all of this. It took me many years to understand that your relationship with alcohol and drinking problems exist on a spectrum, that you don't have to be an alcoholic to quit drinking, that the way that most young people drink, they might not even realize is unhealthy in best case scenario and really dangerous worst case scenario. And I never make these videos to try and convince people to quit drinking. That's not my goal here. My goal is to create educational content where you can make informed decisions around your drinking, understanding the consequences, understanding how alcohol can affect your life. Obviously for me, eventually I looked at my life, I looked at the kind of impact alcohol in my life and really weighed the pros and cons. Like, what does alcohol bring to my life that makes it better, and what does it do that makes it worse? And ultimately, I decided for myself that alcohol brought nothing to my life that I needed or couldn't go without, and it had a lot of negative consequences that I didn't want anymore. And cutting alcohol out of my life completely, where I don't drink alcohol at all, ever anymore, was just the best option for me. And that doesn't mean that you can have a good life and great relationships with alcohol still being a part of your life, but it's really important to know all of the big picture to make those smart choices. And for a lot of people, also realizing that you can choose to not consume alcohol even if you only meet a few of these or none of these criteria. I think the biggest takeaway here is that it isn't black and white like it was for so many years, right? It's easy to say, oh, well, they have a problem, they're alcoholics, we're not like that. Don't have to worry about it, right? We love putting things in boxes. And I think walking through this criteria, a lot of people who might be very normal drinkers might see some red or at least yellow flags talking through these. And that's why I really wanted to take the time to walk through all of them and talk about how they were applied to me too. But I feel like this is definitely an eye-opener. And you realize that there's a lot of gray area, right? And even now we're really changing the narrative, sort of introducing this concept of gray area drinking, which is all of that gray in between. You might not be someone who has a physical addiction to alcohol where you need alcohol to function. And then on the other hand, you have people who don't ever drink, and there's a lot of gray area in between. And there's a lot of different ways that alcohol can affect people's lives. And there's just as many reasons to quit for all of those shades of gray. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, not just with this video, but with all of my sobriety content, talking about my journey here as well. And I think especially on this channel, and I say this at the end of every video, I feel like, but the amount of people and the variety of people who comment on my videos that sort of engage in conversations around drinking you can see the wide spectrum of people with their experiences with drinking and their experience with sobriety. Having this conversation, I think, is the most important thing, because you might reach someone or realize for yourself that maybe alcohol isn't something that you want in your life, or maybe you want your relationship with alcohol to look different, or maybe sobriety isn't some scary, like, non-option that it has been before. Okay, I know this video is going to be a long one, so if you made it to the end, thank you so much for joining me. As always, leave a comment talking about your experience, encouraging others, or sharing a difficult challenge you're dealing with currently. I so appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you do enjoy this content. Check out my other sobriety videos and other videos on my channel. I talk about sobriety in these sort of dedicated sobriety videos, but all of my content is sobriety content, where I show how you can live a full, fun, exciting, adventurous, beautiful life where alcohol is just not a part of it. But that's it for today's video. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day whenever you're watching this. Hopefully I will see you in a future video. And until then, sending you lots of light and love.